and today we are going to make overview for the final exam. And your final exam date is on 29th of December at 2 o'clock. And your topics, you are going to start studying from chapter 4 for the final exam. You are responsible from chapter 4. You are going to just read the chapter 4. I'm not going to ask from chapter 4, but chapter 4 is the basic chapter, so you must study. And then you are going to continue with chapter 6, which is about supply, demand, and government policies. For this chapter, you are responsible from price ceilings, price floors, when price ceiling and price floor is binding, when they are not binding, and how do price ceilings and price floors affect market outcomes. For example, price ceiling causes what after it is binding, and price floor causes what after it is binding. And then you are going to study tax. What is a tax? How we calculate tax? What is the effect of tax on demand, and what is the effect of tax on supply? And what is the incidence of a tax? And what determines the incidence? This is the chapter 6 topics you are going to study. And after this one, you are going to continue with chapter 7. And chapter 7 is about consumers, producers, and the efficiency of markets. You are going to study consumer surplus, how is it related to the demand curve. You are going to study what is producer surplus, how is it related to the supply curve. And you must understand how to calculate consumer surplus and producer surplus by using formulas and by using demand and supply curves, and how we calculate total surplus. So at this chapter 7, you are going to study welfare economics. You are going to study consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total surplus. So at this chapter, you must know how to calculate surplus by using demand and supply curves and by using the formulas. So this is chapter 7 topics. And then after this one, you are going to continue with chapter 9. Chapter 8 not included for the final exam. Chapter 8 not included. You are going to continue with chapter 9, which is application, which we cover international trade. So at this chapter, you are going to study what determines how much of a good of a country will import or export, who benefits from trade, who does trade harm, do the gains outweigh the losses, and if policymakers restrict imports, who benefits, who is harmed, do the gains from restricting imports outweigh the losses. So in this chapter, you are going to look at consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total surplus. For when you export, when a country import or export, the effects on the surplus, in other words, you are going to study at this chapter. And this is chapter 9. And for this chapter, you must know what will happen to consumer surplus after an import and export, what will happen to producer surplus after an import or export, and what will happen to total surplus after the trade, which is import and export. So this is the topics you are going to study for the chapter 9. And after chapter 9, you are going to continue with chapter 10. Chapter 10 is about externalities. So in this chapter, you are going to study what is an externality. We have two kinds of externality. We have positive and negative externality. You must know how to give examples for positive and negative externality. What are the externalities, outcomes on the market? What will happen to supply curve after a negative externality? What will happen to equilibrium, which we call social optimum quantity, after a negative externality? What will happen to positive externality on the demand curve? So you must know which direction the curve is going to shift. What will happen to equilibrium point? What will happen to social optimum quantity after a positive externality? You must able to give examples for each of them, and how the government is going to solve the externality problem by positive externality. In other words, how the government is going to internalize the positive externality and negative externality, you must study. And what are the private solutions to externalities? What are the private solutions you must know, especially the Coase theorem you must study in this chapter as a private solution to externality. So this is what we are going to study at chapter 10. And after chapter 10, you are going to continue with chapter 11. Chapter 11 is about goods. We have 4 kinds of goods. You have 4 kinds of goods with 2 characteristics. So you must know the characteristics of public goods, private goods, common resources, and club goods. You must able to give examples for each, and you must able to define what is the characteristic, what we mean by excludable and rival in consumption. So how might the government improve market outcomes in the case of public goods or common resources you must study. So this is the topics for the chapter 11 you are going to study. So you must define the characteristics of 4 goods with examples in this chapter. So this is all for chapter 11. After chapter 11, you are going to continue with chapter 12. Chapter 12 is the most important chapter for you. So at this chapter, you are going to calculate the cost of production. You must able to understand what is a production function, what is marginal product, how are they related. Before this one, you must know how to calculate a profit. And we have 2 kinds of profit. We have economic profit and accounting profit. You must know the difference between economic and accounting profit. And then we have 2 kinds of cost. We have explicit cost and implicit cost. You must define what is an explicit cost, how we calculate. What is an implicit cost, how we calculate. And then after this one, we have various costs. We have fixed cost, variable cost, and total cost. So you must know how to calculate total cost. You are going to add fixed cost with variable cost. How to calculate fixed cost? It is total cost minus variable cost. And how to calculate variable cost? It is total cost minus fixed cost. And then we have average cost. We have average total cost, which is average fixed cost plus average variable cost. And you can calculate average total cost as total cost divided by quantity. And then we have average variable cost, which is variable cost divided by quantity. And then we have average fixed cost, which is fixed cost divided by quantity. And then at this chapter, chapter 12, you learn how to calculate marginal cost, which is change in total cost divided by change in quantity. And then I'm going to give you a table, and you are going to fill in the table by using the cost calculations. So you must know the formulas of cost of production. You are going to calculate cost by using the formulas. And then we have cost in short run and cost in long run. And we have efficient scale where marginal cost crosses the average total cost at the minimum point. We call this one efficient scale point. And then the last part of this chapter, we have what are economies of scale. We have diseconomies of scale, economies of scale, and constant returns to scale. So in this chapter, you must know how to calculate profit, explicit cost, implicit cost, total cost, fixed cost, variable cost. And then we have average total cost, average variable cost, average fixed cost. And then we have marginal cost. And then you must know how to draw a curve. When you see a marginal cost curve, you must able to understand. And then we have cost in short run. So we have in the short run, we have fixed cost and variable cost. And in the long run, just we have variable cost. We don't have a fixed cost in the long run. We have economies of scale, which we call scale of production. And we call this one constant returns to scale. When quantity rises, average total cost do not change, stays the constant. We have economies of scale. When quantity rises, average total cost rises. And we have diseconomies of scale. When quantity rises, average total cost falls. So this is all for chapter 12. And after chapter 12, you have two more chapters, which is chapter 13 and chapter 14. And we are going to download chapter 13 and chapter 14 today. So today, during the day, you can check the system for the chapter 13 and chapter 14. You are going to study chapter 13 and 14 also. Chapter 13 is about perfect competition, the characteristics of perfect competition. We have many buyers and many sellers in perfect competition, and they are price taker. And we have revenue calculation in perfect competition. And how we calculate revenue, total revenue, it is price multiplied by quantity. We have average revenue, which is total revenue divided by quantity. And we have marginal revenue, which is change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. We have shutdown, exit, and entry for a competitive firm. When to shut down? Shut down from a market when total revenue is less than variable cost. And we have exit, when to exit. Exit from the market when total revenue less than total cost. And when to enter a market when the total revenue is greater than total cost. And for a perfectly competitive market, price equal to marginal revenue equal to average revenue. So if the price of a good is $9, average revenue is $9, and marginal revenue is $9 for a perfectly competitive market. So at chapter 13, you must able to understand the characteristics of perfect competition, how to calculate the revenue of a perfectly competitive market, and when you calculate the revenue, you must know the price equal to average revenue equal to marginal revenue. And when there is a profit, when total revenue is greater than cost, we have a profit. When total revenue is less than cost, we have a loss. And when revenue is equal to cost, this means profits are maximized. When to shut down, when to exit, when to enter a market. What is the cost of shutting down? What is the cost of exiting from the market? And what is the cost of entry? So you must know. And what's the benefit of shutting down? And what is the benefit of exit from the market? You can study from chapter 13. And after this one, at chapter 14, which is your last chapter, we define what is a monopoly. At monopoly, no close substitutes, just one market power, one important firm, and they have market power, and they have barriers to entry to a market. No easily firms can enter to a monopoly, and so we have three sources of barriers to entry. And for a monopoly, we have price equal to average revenue. So at the last chapter, chapter 14, you are going to study what is a monopoly and what are the sources of barriers to entry for a monopoly, what are the characteristics of a monopoly, and for what is the profit for a monopoly. What is the difference between perfect competition and monopoly profit condition? So this is all for chapter 14. So in the final exam, again, you are going to have two sections. You are going to have section A, which is going to cover 22 multiple choice questions from chapter 4. And after 4, you are going to study chapter 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And for the section B, you are going to have 3 questions. Again, you must study from chapter 6 to chapter 14, but chapter 8 not included, do not forget. So this means at 29th of December at 2 o'clock, you are going to have 2 section exam. Section A, multiple choice. Section B, calculation type questions. So you must bring your calculator for the section B. Do not forget to write down the formulas for section B. You are going to write down the formulas for section B. We need the formulas. So you are going to study chapter 4, 6, 7, 8, sorry, 8 not included, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So this is all for this chapter, for the principles of, for this course, for the principles of economics 1. This is all we are going to cover. We finish all the courses today. You know what you are going to study for the final exam. So I hope you understand the date, the time, and the topics covered for the final exam. So good luck for your final exam. It's all for today.